What is your main takeaway on this story right now? What would the FBI be looking at right now?
Good morning, ma'am. I think the priority one are these backpacks and these pieces of evidence that we've seen in that video. Likely the FBI's Phoenix division is in contact with big box stores and retailers in that area and with their corporate security offices to see exactly who may have purchased these types of items in the past several weeks, and particularly of interest if they purchased 2 or 3 things together, if they purchased a ski mask together, if they purchased a backpack together. That's going to help investigators even narrow it down.
Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon so you never miss any of our future updates. This was never random. That must be clear from the very first moment. What happened to Nancy Guthrie was not the outcome of chance or sudden impulse. The individual who entered her Tucson home that night did not arrive unprepared. They came fully ready. They knew precisely where the cameras were installed, and every action was deliberate. Every movement across the property reflected control that investigators would later describe as exact and intentional. Nothing appeared rushed or chaotic. Whoever did this understood Nancy Guthrie's vulnerabilities, her age, her limited mobility, and her dependence on daily medication. They were masked. They wore gloves. They carried a backpack and a holstered firearm. And somehow, they accomplished all of this without forcing open a single door. That combination of access and foresight does not indicate opportunity. It points to planning. It points to deliberate forethought. Preparation that begins long before any door is even touched. And yet, within days, public suspicion almost immediately zeroed in. Attention shifted toward Tommaso Chione, Nancy Guthrie's son-in-law, the man who drove her home that evening and ensured she entered safely. His name circulated rapidly, often without context, often without caution. But officially, the Pima County Sheriff stated that no suspect or person of interest had been identified. He confirmed that the family cooperated fully with investigators, without hesitation. In cases like this, when answers are missing, a vacuum forms, and in that space, assumptions can race ahead of evidence.
You actively investigating the son-in-law in this case. So there are reports earlier this week, and you refuted that. You said you haven't eliminated everybody. Have you eliminated him or come close to it, or are you actively looking at him?
We're actively looking at everybody we come across in this case. Everybody. We would be irresponsible if we didn't talk to everybody. The Uber driver, the gardener, the pool person, whoever. Everybody. It's so cliche, but everybody's still a suspect in our eyes. That's just how we look at things and think as cops. Does that mean we have a prime suspect? No, and the family's been very cooperative. They've done everything we've asked of them, and we want that relationship to continue. And sometimes people can be mean out there, and that can really harm us.
The FBI later described the individual captured on the doorbell camera as standing between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches with an average build. DNA collected at the scene did not match Nancy Guthrie or anyone known to be close to her. Based on what has been officially released, the evidence does not directly implicate Tommaso Chione, but it points towards something far more unsettling. Whoever carried this out seemed to possess detailed knowledge of Nancy Guthrie's home and her daily routine. That level of awareness rarely comes from a random outsider. It suggests familiarity, proximity, someone close enough to quietly observe routines, vulnerabilities, and the layout without ever attracting attention. When you widen the focus beyond a single individual and examine the broader network surrounding the family, it naturally raises questions, not accusations, questions. Questions that responsible reporting must handle with care, precision, and fact, not assumption or speculation. Before focusing fully on the crime itself, it's important to understand who Nancy Guthrie was. Nancy Ellen Long was born on January 27, 1942, in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She later married Charles Guthrie, a mining engineer, and in the early 1970s, they moved to Tucson, Arizona. They eventually settled in the Catalina foothills, in a ranch-style home where Nancy would spend decades of her life. In 1988, Charles Guthrie died during a mining exploration trip in Mexico at just 49 years old. Nancy was left to raise her 3 children, Annie, Cameron, and Savannah on her own. Instead of stepping back, she moved forward, taking a clerical position in the Public Affairs Department at the University of Arizona. The pay wasn't high, but it came with tuition benefits that made a difference. That single decision helped all 3 of her children attend college. Savannah has spoken publicly about how the family lived modestly, often staying home during college to save money. Nancy made it work. Annie pursued creative and educational work. Cameron became an F-16 fighter pilot, and Savannah rose to become a nationally recognized journalist. Nancy Guthrie's resilience shaped that outcome. By 2026, Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She had limited mobility but was described by the sheriff as mentally sharp, independent, and fully aware. She lived alone, regularly attended St. Philip's in the Hills Episcopal Church, and maintained strong connections within her community. Her absence was noticed quickly because she was deeply present in people's lives. The home she and Charles Guthrie purchased decades earlier, now valued at approximately $1 million, was far more than mere property. It stood as the foundation of her family's history. On Saturday, January 31st, 2026, the evening unfolded like any other. At 5:32 p.m., Nancy Guthrie took an Uber to her daughter Annie's home, roughly 4 miles away. Annie and her husband Tommaso Chione were hosting dinner. The family spent the evening in a simple, familiar way, eating together, talking, and playing games. Around 9:48 p.m., Tommaso Chione drove Nancy Guthrie back home. The garage door opened, and by 9:50 p.m., it closed. At that moment, nothing seemed out of place. There were no signs of disturbance, no indication that anything was wrong. But in the early hours of the morning, at 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, her Google Nest doorbell camera suddenly disconnected. It wasn't a glitch, it had been physically removed from the wall. Then, at 2:12 a.m., system data registered a person at the door, but because there was no active subscription, the footage wasn't immediately accessible. Investigators later worked alongside the FBI's Operational Technology Division to recover hidden back-end data. By Sunday morning, Nancy Guthrie failed to appear at church. Concerned members of the congregation reached out to the family. Relatives arrived at her home shortly before noon and placed a 911 call within minutes. Somewhere between the early morning hours and daylight, Nancy Guthrie vanished. When deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrived, what began as a welfare check quickly escalated into a full criminal investigation. Investigators determined that what had taken place inside that home was neither routine nor accidental. Sheriff Nanos later confirmed that the conditions inside were deeply concerning and inconsistent with any voluntary departure. Blood was discovered at or near the entrance of the house. Forensic testing confirmed the blood belonged to Nancy Guthrie. Media footage appeared to show a trail near the front door. Officials have not disclosed the full extent of her injuries or the volume of blood, but the DNA confirmation makes one thing clear: she was harmed inside her own home. Her personal belongings remained untouched: her phone, her wallet, and the medication she relied on daily, medication that the sheriff noted could be dangerous to miss. An 84-year-old woman does not choose to leave in the middle of the night without these essentials, a fact that strongly challenges any theory of voluntary disappearance. The doorbell camera was not simply turned off, it had been physically removed. Other cameras on the property were also tampered with, indicating deliberate targeting of the security system. Gloves were recovered and sent for testing, and additional evidence was collected, though investigators have not released specifics. Importantly, the sheriff's office stated there was no broader threat to the public, suggesting investigators believe the act was targeted, directed specifically at Nancy Guthrie. No signs of forced entry were reported. No broken windows, no damaged doors, which narrows the possibilities. Either someone had access, or Nancy Guthrie opened the door herself around 2 a.m., raising difficult questions. If she opened the door, it would likely have been for someone she recognized or trusted. If not, someone entered without alerting her, pointing clearly away from randomness. For approximately 2 weeks, public suspicion focused heavily on Tommaso Chione. Much of this momentum began after journalist Ashley Banfield referenced an unnamed source suggesting he might be a prime suspect. That claim, unverified elsewhere, spread rapidly across social media and online forums. Rumors escalated, including alleged gambling debts, fabricated legal documents, and viral posts later traced to overseas spam operations. Several of these claims were publicly debunked. None of these claims were confirmed by law enforcement. What has been officially stated is this: the Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed that no suspect or person of interest had been identified. Sheriff Chris Nanos emphasized that the family cooperated fully and warned that public accusations without evidence were irresponsible. Tomaso Kyon, according to publicly available information, is a longtime Tucson resident, an educator, and Annie's husband. On the night in question, the confirmed timeline shows he drove Nancy Guthrie home after dinner and left only after ensuring she was safely inside. On February 13th, SWAT activity occurred at a residence roughly 2 miles from Nancy's home, not connected to Tomaso or the Guthrie family. Individuals were detained and later released, with no arrest tied to him. Then, on February 10th, the FBI released still images recovered from Nancy Guthrie's Google Nest system showing an armed individual at her front door in the early hours of February 1st. The person wore a ski mask, gloves, and a visible holstered firearm, with a flashlight positioned in their mouth, leaving their hands free. That image shifted the narrative, reinforcing investigators' assessment that this was planned, targeted, and executed with preparation. If the evidence does not support early public assumptions, the harder truth remains. Whoever was responsible demonstrated detailed knowledge of Nancy's home, routines, and security setup. Until that person is identified, the most unsettling possibility is that the real perpetrator has not yet been named. The suspect carried a black backpack and, in one clip, stared directly into the doorbell camera, raising a gloved hand to block the lens. When that failed, a plant from Nancy's garden was ripped free and wedged in front of the camera. Every movement was deliberate and measured, with no panic or hesitation. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed that agents spent days recovering lost, corrupted, and inaccessible footage from the camera's back end. Even though the device had been physically removed, its memory contained crucial evidence. On February 12th, the FBI released a forensic description. The individual is male, approximately 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches with an average build, carrying a black 25L Ozark Trail hiker pack sold exclusively at Walmart. Analysts highlighted a detail that stood out. The suspect appeared profoundly comfortable on the property, which is not how a stranger navigates an unfamiliar home at 2 a.m. That is how someone moves through a place they have seen before. Former FBI Supervisory Special Agent and criminal profiler Jim Clementi noted a possible tattoo on the masked suspect's right wrist, a potential identifier that could break the case if recognized locally. Nancy Guthrie was in the safest environment she could have been, her own home, set back from the road with a secure perimeter. For an offender to enter that space requires a motivation powerful enough to outweigh enormous risk. Motivations could range from financial gain to revenge, personal ideology, or even sexual crimes. In any scenario, the preparation indicates an extraordinary level of planning. Investigators also requested security footage from neighbors within a 2-mile radius, specifically from January 11th between 9 p.m. and midnight. That suggests the suspect had been observing Nancy's routines for weeks. This was not a crime planned overnight. Whoever carried it out knew the property, the cameras, the timing, and the layout intimately before acting. If the perpetrator is not family, they nonetheless know the home as though they were. The suspect comes from within her world, someone who had access and had spent time in proximity, observing without raising alarm. Within Tomaso Kyon's extended social and creative circles, there are individuals with public criminal records in Pima County: burglary, robbery, theft, embezzlement, DUI. These are documented cases, not speculation. Having a record does not make someone a kidnapper, but it provides context in an investigation that demands attention to proximity, access, and opportunity. Observers online have noted similarities between the masked figure and certain individuals connected to Nancy's wider circle: body build, facial hair, and even possible wrist markings. Whether those observations hold up is for the FBI to determine. Internet speculation cannot substitute for evidence, but it reflects a pattern: the suspect's familiarity with the property, their methodical behavior, the tools used, and the timing all point to someone who had been there before. While public attention remained fixed on Tommaso Chione, the investigation was moving in other directions. On February 6th, federal authorities arrested 42-year-old Derek Kella of Hawthorne, California, for sending fake ransom messages demanding millions in Bitcoin. He had never met Nancy Guthrie and was later released pending trial. On February 10th, the FBI released the doorbell footage, triggering over 13,000 tips, with the sheriff's office receiving more than 18,000. That same day, Carlos Palazuelos was briefly detained due to a perceived resemblance to the masked suspect. He was fully cooperative and quickly ruled out. On February 12th, the FBI confirmed the suspect's description, and a reward of $100,000 was announced. The next day, SWAT and forensics teams executed a large operation near East Orange Grove Road, 2 miles from Nancy's home. Multiple individuals were detained and released. No charges were filed. Sheriff Chris Nanos reiterated that nobody is fully cleared until an arrest is made. Specialized FBI teams, including cellular analysis units and helicopter-mounted Bluetooth scanners, were deployed to trace signals from Nancy's pacemaker. Retired FBI agents noted that suspects have surfaced and are being evaluated. Hundreds of detectives and agents now work on the case, analyzing mountains of data. Every detail, every tip, and every lead is scrutinized. The investigation is ongoing, methodical, and far from over. But the underlying truth is clear. Whoever entered Nancy Guthrie's home knew it intimately, and that knowledge could only come from proximity, from connection, from someone who had walked in those spaces before. This case is far from running out of steam. It is building, accumulating pieces that, when placed side by side, reveal a chilling pattern. The suspect wore a mask and gloves, carried a firearm, and removed the doorbell camera from the wall, not in haste, but deliberately, with precision. They covered the lens with a plant from Nancy's own garden before taking it, a detail that speaks to careful observation, prior knowledge of the entryway, and intent. There was no forced entry. That leaves only 2 possibilities. The suspect had a key, or they knew how to gain access without ever breaking a thing. Nancy's personal belongings were left untouched: her phone, her wallet, her life-sustaining medication. Whoever took Nancy Guthrie didn't come for objects. They came for her. Investigators requested neighborhood surveillance going back a full month, with particular attention to a single date 3 weeks prior. The implication is clear. The perpetrator had been watching, learning, studying the cameras, the routines, the security gaps. And when they finally acted, they moved with what the FBI described as comfort. Comfort, not haste, not panic. Comfort. That word alone speaks volumes. You cannot feel comfortable in a place you have never entered at 2 a.m. You feel comfortable where you have been before. Combine that with what the evidence rules out. The DNA at the scene does not match family. The physical description does not match Tommaso Chione. Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed the family's full cooperation. SWAT operations targeted locations unconnected to the Guthrie family. The person who took Nancy knew the home intimately, but was not family. They had access, but were far enough removed that their DNA would not naturally be present. They had proximity, but remained unseen. It is a very specific profile, someone in the orbit of the family, not at the center, someone who could visit, observe, gather intelligence, and leave without raising a single alarm. And they knew exactly whose suspicion would fall first. It fell on Tommaso Chione. While the world attacked him, the true kidnapper gained time to cover tracks, to wait, to breathe. Every misdirection, every rumor may have been exploited intentionally. One journalist, one unnamed source, one unverified claim, and a man teaching 6th grade biology was cast as a criminal mastermind overnight. Spam factories produced fake stories, financial conspiracies were imagined, social media treated fiction as fact. Meanwhile, investigative resources were diverted, DNA remained unprocessed, doorbell footage unexamined, and the real suspect moved without interference. Nancy Guthrie has now been missing for several days, and her whereabouts remain unknown. She is 84, with limited mobility, reliant on medication that could be fatal if missed. Her pacemaker disconnected shortly after 2:30 a.m. The FBI and local authorities have not located her. Hundreds of agents and detectives are actively working the case. DNA from an unknown individual has been recovered and is being processed through every available database. The Ozark Trail backpack, sold exclusively at Walmart, is traceable through purchase records and surveillance. A possible wrist tattoo remains a potential identifier. Helicopter-mounted Bluetooth scanners sweep for her pacemaker signal. Forensic results from SWAT operations are still being analyzed. Names have surfaced, some cleared, others remain under scrutiny. Sheriff Chris Nanos put it plainly. It may take hours, weeks, months, or years, but they will not stop until Nancy is found. What haunts this case is not simply that an 84-year-old woman was taken from her home. It is how it was done. Every piece of evidence tells the same story. This was premeditated. The cameras were not smashed in panic. They were targeted with intent. The doorbell camera was blocked with plants pulled from the garden by someone who had studied the entrance. There was no forced entry. The suspect moved calmly, deliberately, with a comfort born of familiarity. The DNA excludes family. The physical description does not match Tommaso Chione. SWAT operations struck locations unrelated to the family. The Guthrie family appeared on camera pleading for their mother's return. And yet, the paradox remains. The evidence points away from those closest to her. But the person responsible knew the home as intimately as someone within it. They operated unseen, leaving a trail only a patient, deliberate observer could follow. The question lingers uncomfortably. Who moves with such knowledge, such precision, and remains invisible while an entire world misplaces its suspicion? The kidnapper knew Nancy Guthrie's world intimately, but does not appear to be family. They had access, but they weren't insiders. They were close, but not that close. That's why the circle around the family matters, not because anyone in that circle is guilty. We don't know that. Nobody knows that yet. But somewhere in the web of people who had second-hand access to Nancy's life, her routines, her home, her vulnerabilities, there may be a person who used that access for something unthinkable. And we know this much within that wider circle. There are individuals with documented criminal histories in Puma County, felony charges including burglary, robbery, theft, and embezzlement. That doesn't make anyone guilty of kidnapping Nancy Guthrie. A criminal record is not a conviction in a new crime, but in an investigation where every connection matters, where investigators are collecting DNA swabs from multiple individuals, where the FBI has received over 30,000 tips and is still asking for more. These are details that deserve attention, not accusations. Attention. Former FBI profilers have pointed to a possible tattoo on the masked suspect's wrist as a critical identifier. Online investigators have compared that marking to individuals connected to people in Nancy's extended circle. Whether those comparisons hold up under forensic analysis is for the FBI to determine, not the internet. But the fact that this conversation is happening tells you something important. The scope of this investigation is wider than one man. It always has been. And that brings me to the hardest truth about this case. While public attention remained focused on Tommaso Chione, someone else moved easily, breathing, planning this crime down to the last detail. Someone who anticipated that suspicion would fall on the family, who may have counted on the media circus and online mob to provide cover while they stayed invisible. If this was premeditated, and every sign says it was, then misdirection wasn't just a side effect. It may have been part of the plan. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for a significant time. She is 84 years old and relies on daily medication that could be fatal if missed. Her family has described this as an hour of desperation. The FBI is still actively investigating, and the reward for information stands at $100,000. You can submit tips at tips.fbi.gov and remain completely anonymous. If you live in the Tucson area, investigators are asking for surveillance footage from homes within a 2-mile radius of Nancy's residence. Check your cameras, dash cams, and ring doorbells. Something you captured without realizing it could be the detail that solves this case. I'm asking you directly, share this video. Share it because the conversation around this case needs to change. The mob mentality has done enough damage. It's time to follow the evidence, see the full picture, and bring Nancy Guthrie home. We will cover every development as it unfolds. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you're here when the next piece of the puzzle drops, because I believe this case is closer to breaking than most people realize. When it does, you're going to want to know the whole story. Thank you for watching, for thinking critically, and for caring about justice. Real justice, not internet justice. Nancy, your family loves you, your community is searching for you, and strangers across the country are praying for you. Hold on. Help is coming. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon so you never miss any of our upcoming updates.